won the award for Spider-Verse, which is amazing.
Yeah.
They got a nod for it for best animated film.
Still haven't got to see that.
Oh, it's amazing.
I want to get out. I just haven't had time.
So there are early 20 somethings in the women's book club, and there's specifically 2 African American 20 somethings in the book club, and they start talking about Miles, and one of them raises her hand and says, "I want to know why you think as a white man you can write a story about a black kid." Now, I will tell you this.
Sorry.
There was just a little bit of confrontation in her voice, but that wasn't necessarily where she was going with it, but you could feel that tension in the room when the question was asked.
Right.
And he kind of started talking about his kids and that he's actually adopted 2 kids of color and why he wanted to create characters that they could read in comic books because they weren't there.
Right.
So he has a perspective on writing a teen kid of color in his comic books that he was able to lend to Miles to give him, a real background. So there was a moment where these 2 people that were kind of were able to come together talking about this one issue. But it's really interesting. The audience kind of expects that if you're going to write a gay character or a female character, and like that, you need to have some
sort of connection to that,
as opposed to just living some fantasy about what it means to be somebody else. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that.
All right. But I've had a lot of thoughts about that.
But it was really interesting to have this moment where we had to, they feel like a younger audience feels like that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Kelly, who's 10 years younger than me, saw Joss Whedon as a feminist hero for creating Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yet the women in the book club that are 10 years younger than her don't see him that way, because what it means to be a feminist has changed from what Buffy was 2 decades ago.
And that's unfair to judge that art upon that. You have to, if you're going to judge art, you have to be willing to step into what that culture had to say.
Which is what we're doing here, right?
And it is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or trying to do, which is what we're trying to do with the podcast.
But I've had a lot of thoughts about artists doing that. I hear that argument, whether it be about black, gay, man, woman. But I think that belittles the idea of art because, okay, if I go back and I want to write a story about my friend who I witnessed from the time we were 15 until he died in his 40s, being a gay man, coming out to his parents, I was a part of that. Now, I think if I write it from his perspective and only tell his perspective, maybe I'm only going on hearsay. But if I at least tell it from the observatory position, that I'm writing a story of truth. And maybe I'm not helping a child come out, but I'm certainly helping the person that's the friend of the child who comes out to understand a perspective and how that works. I don't think we can stop art that's observatory from the third person perspective, if that makes sense. I think we have to allow an artist to have characters like that. You can't stop it.
You talk about the retard word. That was actually in Jessica Jones comic books when he first started by Michael Bennett started writing it. That would come up every so often as a derogatory term. She would say retard, this, whatever. So that actually came up in the book club with the women that were 2 decades younger were horrified that he'd used that word in the comic book. But the book was, a decade
10 years old.
Yeah, 10 years old.
But that's no different than D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which is one of the considered to be one of the absolute pinpoints of when narrative film began.
And it's full of Ku Klux Klan.
Oh my God, it is a champion film for the KKK. In fact, they used to use it supposedly at rallies to incite the violence and whatnot. But it's historically significant. You have to look at what it did for narrative film.
Triumph of the Will, which is all about Nazis, but is beautifully shot.
Oh my God, it's gorgeously shot. And you see that anytime you ever see something where they want to evoke a regime. In fact, there are shots in Revenge of the Sith where it is evoking Triumph of the Will.
Yeah. I think the subtle difference between these 2 instances is the fact that Bendis is still an active writer. Mm-hmm. This work is just maybe a decade old.
Right.
So they have an opportunity to talk to somebody about how he feels about this and how this has changed.
Get context for it. Yeah.
They might think that, Jessica Jones, because she's on Netflix, should be more current and more modern than the context of what language was a decade ago.
I agree with that.
So on some level, yes, as we move a little bit further along in time and Jessica Jones becomes the work that it is based upon it's that, then we can have that conversation. But it's still so fresh enough, and maybe even to a certain extent Buffy-ish is so fresh enough that they look at it with modern eyes as opposed to a classic.
Okay, so this brings up a question from me that's pretty on point for what we have going on, and that was the Kevin Hart debate. So this is what I think about Twitter. This whole thing where now we've decided we are going to
research everybody's history
and look for things that they said during a different time when it was okay. Now, have they made reparations since then? Have they done things like that? But Richard, you can't take something.
I'm just gonna grimace.
Look, I don't use that kind of language. I don't talk like that. But what I look at is that people can change in one moment. And at that point, we at least, and we all, this is the weird thing about the human society as a whole. We want stories of redemption. We want to see people that have fallen in the dirt, pick themselves up, and become a better person.
But if we're specifically talking about Kevin Hart and not James Gunn, if we're specifically talking about Kevin Hart,
I'll be fair, I haven't read Kevin Hart's tweets. I only saw
Kevin Hart is no hero or champion or advocate or anything for the gay community or the LGBT community, anything like that. So the fact that he's being skewered on past comedy bits and was asked to back down is also
comment
is also a commentary on who he still is today. But
is it not hypocritical of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences to ask someone who, for past instances of being derogatory towards something that he's never made reparations for, and the Academy supports the Motion Pictures Society of America that has made films that have been derogatory toward it, and they've never come out and said these are wrong. They're being hypocritical in that situation.
I mean, I think you just have to find the places that you can move. You can move forward and win small battles on, and kind of move society forward.
To me, that should have been.
I do not particularly think Kevin Hart is a giant villain, but just in terms of,
I don't think he's funny. I didn't want to see him on
there. But then you look at somebody like James Gunn, and you look at what happened to him. I thought that was
horrible.
But he was specifically targeted by a conservative media that wanted to get him out because of these things, not because he was offensive to them, but because they just wanted a victory.
So how do we move beyond being a society that wants to see people change, yet we won't let go of it because we have physical proof of it? It's part of the reason, I'm not putting anything on Twitter other than, hey, listen to the latest minute of the Apes episode. I don't do anything.
I know we've talked about this at some point, but I'm serious. Today's modern culture, and we see it right now with the president, we are moving in a place where all of our elected officials will never, ever, ever be saints like they had to be 10 years ago-ish. You're going to have your elected president that had nudes leaked. You're going to have your elected president that, but
I think I just vomited in my mouth.
But that's where it's moving. They're going to have a bad moment on Facebook where they said derogatory things. Again, it's just going to move that forward.
Going into how things were in different times in the 60s and 50s, the press actually hid stuff like that.
Yeah, they suppressed it, and it was in relationships.
We don't need to cover this. It's not important. It's just, now it's important to us.
So there was a question I had earlier, and this is very trivial to the depths at which we're talking here. But I'm curious about something, because I said something to someone recently. There's a singer named Brandi Carlile who I love. She is gay. She's married with, I think she has 2 children now. And I said to someone, I'm like, she's not a classic beauty, but God, she's hot. And they said, she's gay. And I'm like, wait, does that mean as a straight man that I can't find her desirable and even potentially go into fantasies of having that relationship with her? I just know it's not going to happen.
I bet.
So
Richard,
can we not look at another person?
You totally can.
I bet Richard, found that the dumbest conversation.
I bet you find some straight men really hot.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with finding somebody attractive and appreciating the fact that they have a natural beauty or a strong nose or a good jawline or
just their
work out really
attitude
well
towards life
fit.
Makes them attractive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this idea that they always joke about, ugly men getting hot women a lot of times, but I often find that people who they're talking about, there's something really, really interesting about that person. Like, typically the ugly guy, this sounds so terrible. Typically the ugly guy has something else that is actually really, really awesome. Like, they're really funny. They're really, really interesting. They're really witty. And a lot of times relationships are you want to be attracted to your spouse. You do. I'm super attracted to my spouse, but there are all these other things that make them so much more interesting and exciting. So when you see 2 people that you think are mismatched, there's something really, really amazing about
between the
2 of them that you just don't necessarily
see. We just had an instance that I went out yesterday to help. I won't mention the organization. My wife and daughter were doing something that they're a part of. That's all I'm saying. I had to be out and open. And this Hispanic woman walked by, and it was like, damn. I mean, now, she was also presenting herself where her breasts were pushed to the sky.
Right.
She was hot, tight pants on. She gets into this car with a dude that the three of us then was like, we just all were dumbfounded. As he drove by, it was a little bit like Jabba the Hutt. And I'm like, what? But at the same time, we had just told Abby, who's got a crush on a boy, she keeps saying he's so beautiful. I'm like, okay, beauty is one thing, baby. But eventually the beauty gets old if there's nothing else there. And we tried to have that very conversation. And you know, of course, Shelley insults me. He goes, you know, I love your daddy because he makes me laugh. I'm like, hey, what the? There better be more than that. But that is so correct. And I found it insulting from the friend who told me you can't be attracted to someone because of that. I can be attracted to anyone I want to.
Yeah.
And I would hope if this Brandy Carlisle heard that a man thought she was beautiful and hot, she'd go, well, thank you. She can say thank you. It's the same as that. I always hated the question of, well, he can't be around me because he wants to sleep with me. So you're around women that you want to sleep with and don't want a part of you. It is such a reduction of that person to a base level. And the truth is, I can't handle telling you, Richard, thank you so much, but I'm not interested. And just move on and be friends from that point.
That was kind of the argument for a really, really long time for a lot of gay people, right? Oh, they're just going to want to get in my pants. Like some random straight guys. Like, like, okay, well, let's talk about the reality of this. Okay, first of all, you have to be cute. Second of all, you have to be interesting.
Right.
We have to have something in common. I have to find you romantically interesting. I have to find you sexually attractive. I mean, there's like this whole, you have to be gay. Right. There's like this whole level of like, of things that have to move down this list of like, I just don't want to sleep with you. I need a reason. I need something to like make me want this thing. And there's all these stops. Like, first, you're not gay.
Well, but
second, you're not attractive. Third, you're not interesting. You're not funny.
Any hetero man has approached a woman that they found attractive, that they weren't interested in, they still had a friendship. Why can't you see that, oh, it's just flopped?
I mean, you can find somebody attractive, but that doesn't mean sex is going to happen.
No.
And you can't just assume because, oh, that person's super hot woman, like straight man to a straight woman, you know, oh, she's so hot, I want to get to know her. Oh, it's developed into a friendship because there's no way we're ever going to sleep with each other because just because she's attractive doesn't mean this is going to happen.
Yeah. That conversation probably more than anything about homosexuality makes me want to punch a lot of straight men.
Okay, so I was going to tell you this. Okay. I had two things I was going to talk about, but I'll save the other one for, I don't know, opening of an episode. So I found out this week, speaking of racists and misogynists.
Oh, good Lord. Ding, ding.
So there was a writer for D Magazine that was a frequent customer at the store.
Okay.
He was super into Flash. He has a daughter, probably a little bit younger than Abby. He is our age.
Okay.
And he eventually gets let go from D Magazine because his viewpoints were a little extreme for them. He was a little bit on the conservative side. Now, keep in mind, D Magazine is a conservative magazine, but because it's journalists, there's a lot of them that are kind of middle of the road, left leaning, right? So it's a mix of a political magazine. So they weren't just going to let somebody go for being kind of extreme, but he would upset the people in staff there. Hopefully he's not listening. So anyway, he's probably a huge Planet of the Apes fan. So,
hey, thank you for your patronage on this. Keep listening.
So then he started to kind of create this online persona that was specifically kind of very conservative.
Oh. Now, did he keep created under his own name so you could immediately attribute to him, or was it kind of a...
Yes and yes.
Oh.
So he starts doing some freelance work. He writes some articles for the Dallas Morning News. We are friends on Facebook. And every so often he would have a political comment or a joke or whatever that I would have to chime in on. We'd have a little bit of a heated back-to-back.
Was he aware that you're gay?
Yes,
because I've seen you post that on Facebook.
We've had a little heated back and forth here and there. Nothing extreme, but just a little bit like, well, this is my viewpoint. This is my viewpoint. So on, so on, so on. He would then kind of direct message me and just let me know, hey, you know, we're cool. I just want to have this relationship. I just... blah, blah, blah. He would still come in every so often, but not as frequently to get Flash comics. He would talk about his daughter, send me photos of her in like her Halloween superhero costume, all that kind of stuff back and forth. All right. So he still talks about doing dancing with his wife, things like that. So I watch his Facebook, but his political talk is kind of pulled back a little bit on Facebook. Okay. He did make a comment, I think about a year ago, about the fact that he was banned on Twitter for hostile political speech. Now, I didn't follow him on Twitter or follow that stuff. The Southern Poverty Law Center just did an article outing him as this horrible podcaster racist named the Spectre.
Oh.
Holy.
He created a thing called Brick by Day,